Okay, let's get started again. I want to quickly go over this, and since so few people were here for session one, I want to quickly go over this concept of method refinement, targeted method refinement, which we kind of drill into the people actually doing targeted proteomics, SRM and PRM, and we're coming back around to, does it make sense to do some level of method refinement before we get into quantifying our peptides? And Mike has shown you that we're actually doing. Uh, we've got a way to do a whole proteome calibration curve to try to figure out, which peptides we think we can actually do some form of linear detection on. And so we're definitely experimenting a lot on this in the MacLean lab. And I think it comes from our background in, the whole goal of Skyline originally was to end up with a truly quantitative assay. And so we're helping people, and we were, commissioned to do Skyline originally by a clinical proteomics consortium. And so this idea of like, okay, how do you get to something truly quantitative that could actually be used in the clinic was a major focus for us. And so we envisioned, actually, I think if I go back here, we envisioned this whole like, oh, there's this discovery pipeline that's going to, be producing candidates for us to review. And then we'll do this targeted method refinement. And what we're trying to get is a quantitative assay that could be used in a clinic. And then the inputs were all this spectrum matching. These are all the tools that you can build a spectral library from in Skyline. So somebody was asking about, well, what if I'm just using SciEx tools? Well, you can see that we support Protein Pilot, or we support MaxQuant Andromeda, and so there's Spectrum Mill is from Agilent. There's a whole lot of tools here that you can build these libraries from. But the bigger thing that I want to get across here is that, we can take DIA all that, like thanks to a lot of path breaking work from a lot of the groups here, and definitely here the Aebersold lab and the MacLean lab have been working very hard, as well as the Nevjitsky lab and a number of labs, to expand DIA all the way to where you could just do it as a replacement for label-free DDA quantification. But there may be some sort of happy medium where we do some amount of refinement. So and this is pretty much where we're starting, as RT libraries, so those are IRT, spectral libraries, broad methods, and then use any other previous measurements to inform what we measure when we enter this targeted method refinement cycle. And that cycle, which we're trying to make people actually doing targeted proteomics very familiar with, is this: you build a method, you run the method on the mass spectrometer, evaluate the results, refine, and keep going around here before you start doing your highly multi-replicate methods. So you before you start looking at data that you're intending to be your quantitative assay, you go around the cycle potentially multiple times, improving your assay and understand, and so that you get a really highly precise assay with a low amount of interference, no peptides with degradation. Yeah, so the refinement, what might be happening over in this refinement box is, abundance, measurability. I mean, just because we got a DDA spectrum definitely doesn't mean that we can measure it by DIA. And then relative abundance. Like, okay, if we're going to measure a protein, do we necessarily need to measure 40 peptides in that protein, or would just 5 do, or 3, or even 1? And then degradation, I just spoke about. There are peptides that degrade, and we'd like to take them out of our measurements because they're just going to either cause a lot of noise or potentially confound our results. There are digestion, like how well is this thing released, and And if you understand the digestion, you can sometimes there are some peptides that you may not be digesting optimally for. There are some peptides that start to degrade if you digest for too long, and that also can add variance. And then when we really get into target, we start doing optimization and stuff that we would never do here. But if we had full knowledge of all of this information, we might choose to use it even on a discovery experiment, right? We don't necessarily just need to target everything. I mean, it would make our numbers of peptides measured go down, and everybody likes to see, oh, I measured 50,000 peptides, but we might actually get more precise measurements of the proteins we're interested in. And that's it. So that I want to introduce that concept because that's the concept that we're going to explore now with the CelebSec data. Because one of the things that they did was they did this really exhaustive fractionated DDA library. They also did these replicate measurements. And so what I decided so based on what I'm seeing in the Macasse lab, I decided, well, let me see if I give Mina a document where it's only got the peptides that are highly reproducibly measurable in the replicates. So there's 8 runs that are supposed to be technical replicates. So I should have very low CVs in those. If I give her a document where I have only peptides where I could achieve a low CV, how is that going to work statistically for MS stats versus a document where I give her just everything out of the DDA library to the best of my measurement? And I'm using mProfit to tell me whether or not I could measure something. But then if I could measure it, below a Q value of 0.01, then it goes into the statistical tools. And so that was the sort of interesting genesis of why we're looking at this data today. So we're going to now leave this this hands-on CelebSec file because what we need is to import data. Actually, so I'm going to now pop you over to a document with imported data. Let's get it started. So file open, and so the first one I'm going to have us open is this CelebSec reps. So this is going to be, so there are 2 files that actually, oh, whoops, not that CelebSec reps. I guess CelebSec reps. So we're going to open CelebSec reps. You can also see that there's CelebSec all I and low CV I. And so these are 2, all I is just CelebSec with the Osmotic shock data set. So the data set we're interested in quantifying is this Osmotic shock experiment. And I've sort of done it 2 ways. One, I just imported the entire Osmotic shock data set into the document we just created. And then the other one, which is exhaustive, has 50,000 precursors. We're measuring 50,000 precursors, and then the other one, this low CV we're going to do the process to get the low CV document. So you can see this low CV this is a document with no results imported, and we're going to use the replicate data to come up with this low CV document. So then we have 2 documents, one where we're going to import into this document with 305 transitions, and then another where we're going to import into this low CV document. And actually, before I leave, the last thing that we would do to this document before we started importing data, so what we'd like to do now is import both the replicate data and just the osmotic shock data into this document, into 2 separate documents. Use this as a template, but since we're going to want to train an mProfit model, you can see we're missing decoys. So it would be a mistake to just start importing here. We would want to go to Edit, Refine, Add Decoy Peptides, you know, the default is just fine. So you can see that doubles the number of transitions. We've got 600, or almost doubles, because it's not gonna create decoys for the IRTs, but we've got 606,000 transitions now. What? Add decoy peptides, and not everybody has to do this. So this is because we're leaving this document, but this now would be a document ready for importing data, right? So that's our thing. We want to get our IRTs in here. We want to choose some things that we're gonna extract data for. We could also remove these reverse peptides if we wanted, these reverse proteins if we wanted, and then that would become the document that we're importing data into. And so now we're going to go open this reps, the SelevSec reps document, which is just the 8 technical replicates of SelevSec data. So there's nothing that's varying here. This is just technical replicates, and our goal is to just say, okay, what was repeatably measurable? While we wait for that to open up, I'm gonna, well, maybe not. We'll see. Oh, so somebody was asking about, okay, if I want more information on how to set up the command line script that you showed us and run things on a cluster, a big computer, how do I do that? So, so I'm on the Skyline website. If I click on this Skyline installation page, which you all should have visited, there's a table of contents over here, and if I go to the webinars page, or I can get to it by down here, more webinars, I think. Is that going to take me to the right place? Yeah, if I click more webinars, then now I got a list of all the webinars that have been done. And we have large-scale DIA and optimizing large-scale DIA. So if you want more of this, and definitely, I think both of these have access to the scripts as well. Yeah, here's scripts, and the other one has scripts too. So you'll get. I mean, there's a lot of data to download. So you're better. Yeah, and this one's got scripts as well. You're almost better going back and watching the recordings of this course. But if you can download these data files, then you can do other tutorials and deal with other scripts. Unfortunately, there's not a written tutorial on setting up the scripts and doing Skyline command line. So that's that. And so at this point, so my data is imported. Do other people have imported data? Okay, so how do the IRTs look? Look pretty good in terms of retention time for sure. Again, I can change to value retention time and see these nice straight lines that go across. So let's see, if I order by acquired time, it probably doesn't change anything. Who has an idea of how closely these were acquired to each other? That would be a nice thing to know, right? Because if we're interested in so I want to ask the question of, do you think these 8 replicates are going to catch degradation? So if there is degradation among my peptides, do you think these 8 replicates will, if I have a CV cutoff, what I'd love to have happen is all my degrading peptides would go away, right? So let's answer that question by going to View, Document Grid, and now we want, so is everybody on the replicate view? I am. If you're not, switch to the replicates and then customize the view. And I don't actually need sample type or analyte concentration or dilution factor. So I've got replicates, and I would like to have the file name. Actually, I'm going to put this down below. I'd like to have the file name, the acquired time, and that's it. And I'm just going to call this replicate file times. Everybody have that report? If you didn't get it, that's fine. You can just look at my screen. So this gives us some idea of how closely these were acquired. And you can see that they're acquired from 5 a.m. on the 16th to 12 p.m. on the 17th. So that's pretty good. That's over 24 hours. So I would actually say that, in the MacLean lab, we do an experiment where we acquire things. We make sure that they're 48 hours apart to detect whether or not we see degradation. And so if we have degrading peptides, they should not do well for CVs here. So I'm going to close that. So now the way I originally did this for Mina is I had to run an R script to figure out which ones were the low CVs, but then this summer I had a really talented intern who did some very nice work, and named Toby Road, and so now we have this peak areas CV histogram. We actually have a 2D CV histogram too. You can look at it in 2D. So this is the 2D CV histogram, which I work with less. But there you can see you see this pattern where the more intense things tend to be the Rudy was talking about this. If you were to draw a line through it, it would be curved. Because the less intense things are the things that more have a problem with their CVs. Okay, so let's go back to, I'm going to close that one and go to view, peak areas, just CV histogram overall. And wow, you probably don't have exactly this, right? If I go to none and I turn off my maximum of 100, do other people have the maximum of 100? We did that yesterday. So is everybody looking at something like me? Where do I get what? So it looks like this, and what looks kind of, yeah. So I guess we should maybe take a look at the model. So this is this. Oh, we haven't even applied a model yet, have we? Have we? Yeah. So this is okay. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. This is data. So let's close this down or put it. Oh yeah. Let's just close this down. So this is we haven't even done the reintegrate step. So this is data immediately after it was imported. So let's go and build our M-profit model and apply it here. So edit, refine, advanced. Oops, not it, sorry. Edit, refine, reintegrate. And we need to add a model. This goes a little bit quicker than with Brooder because we've only got 8 samples and probably a pretty similar number of transitions. So this is our first attempt to apply fractionated DDA library. So this is, I'm calling it a pan-yeast library. It's a library that's deeper than we maybe expect to be able to detect in our sample. In the Bruder case, we just used max quant results from running our normal sample prep. So we didn't do any special fractionation. We didn't try to get any deeper. We just used a library we used the Biognosis library that was supplied that they got based on running replicates of their sample. So let's train this model. Once you've got it up, click train model. And it will go through a few iterations and eventually converge, and then it calculates the score contributions so we can see how that worked out. All right, so this is going to look a little different from the other models you've done so far. Who can tell me what's the difference between this model and the other ones you've done so far? When you look at what? Go ahead. Oh, intensity is red. Yeah, it's such a poor score that, and that definitely happens when you use these whole proteome libraries, that there's randomly very intense things. So intensity ends up not being a very good score in the end, if you haven't pre-selected your peptides. But what about the score distribution? What does it look like? What? Not as well separated, but actually there's also two distributions here, right? There's a distribution. We've mostly been dealing with things where we use DDA to pre-select things that we thought we could detect, right? And then we go back and say, can we detect them with DIA? And yep, sure we can. And that's great news. But this is a case where we used a lot of other sample preparation to go like, what could possibly be detected in this yeast with a mass spectrometer? Okay, now let's just apply that to our normal sample prep. And what we find is that there's a bunch of stuff that it really isn't detected. So this is a bimodal distribution, and so there's a bunch of stuff in here that's going to get very low Q values because it looks essentially the same as the decoys, right? I think that's pretty interesting. Retention time's a little bit better score. I don't think retention time was much of a good score at all before, and now it's at the 14% contribution. And then there's some sort of weird tension between retention time difference squared and retention time difference, so they kind of separate in opposite directions. So maybe there's a total of about 10% attributed to retention time scores, and then again, both library intensity and shape score do extremely well as usual, and then the coelution count does okay, and the product mass error is actually pretty good here. So that means that the mass accuracy must be pretty good in this data. Okay, so that's our model, and we will call this Celeb-Sec reps, and click OK, and then just apply it. And we don't have any manual integration, and we don't want the Q value cutoff to be applied and have all the peaks removed. So Skyne's gonna adjust the peak boundaries. So we haven't made it to so this is not the osmotic shock data. That's the interesting quantitative data. We're still doing method refinement. Learning from prior measurements before we go to our case of interest. All right, so I've got that done, and now I'm going to bring back up that peak areas CV histogram. Okay, so what do you see about the CV histogram now? It's much better? Okay, maybe. So the median CV is 23%, and there's almost 46% of my data is below 20%. But is this a single distribution? No, it's kind of bimodal itself, and there's probably a bunch of this stuff are probably the same things that I was seeing in the M-profit model. It's the stuff that you can't really pick. So let's apply our knowledge. So we'll go to the properties, and we can say that we want a CV cutoff of 0.01, right? And we're going to zoom in on our most interesting results. So we'll set our maximum CV to 100, and then click OK. And now you can see that we lost the bump. And wow, if we cut off only things that have, and you can see that there's now, because I applied a cutoff, it's saying, okay, we're going to start with at least 2 detections that are at that cutoff. Can I go down to 1? No, I can't go down to 1. Okay, well anyway, so at least 2 detections at a cutoff of 0.01. So that's pretty good data. I'm already up to 97. I'm already up to 87. If I increase the number that I require something to be found in, you can see that has an effect on the CV. If I go only peptides that are found in every run, now I'm up to 92% below CV, but I'm also losing peptides. So, and this is definitely a way of controlling false discovery rate. It's definitely not as statistically solid as using the types of methods that Ben and Rudy talked about, where we're actually calculating Q values across the entire run, which hopefully we'll have in Skyline soon. But something that gets detected 4 times is far less likely to be a false discovery. And then now we're saying, okay, if we say 4 times, 89% are below 20% CV. And then we can also apply some normalization. So let's see the effect of normalizing by the medians, which is just a global normalization. And you can see that it gets even a little bit better, right? Our median CV at this point is 8.4%, so that's pretty good. So let's go ahead and apply that cutoff, and that will give us a new document that we could also do quantification on. And that's the goal of this exercise, is to try both ways, where we import the osmotic shock data into just the completely broad, document, and then apply our statistics to that, or we do this prior refinement. And this is just a CV refinement. You remember that what Mike is saying is that Lindsay Pino in our lab is actually doing a calibration curve refinement on her data before she uses it. Okay. Anybody interested in what the decoys look like? So we got the 1% targets, and here are the decoys. Wow, decoys look terrible. Although there are some things that can be measured in the decoys at not at 10% CV. So the decoys will actually catch fairly things that are consistent, but they're definitely a lot worse than our targets. So let's go back to the targets. Why didn't we get targets below 1%? Oh, there we go. Is that targets at 1% FDR? Okay, and then we're going up to 4. Okay, and now if we go remove above CV cutoff. So this is going to remove everything out here. And we can change the CV cutoff, but I like 20. It's pretty good. And we get 90% of our things above there. And now, so remove above CV cutoff. That's a refinement that gets applied. Now it says that 100% of our things are above 20%. What's this thing over here? That's just because the we're normalizing by median intensity, and our median intensity just changed. So there's a little bit of when you apply the cutoff, it changes the CVs slightly. And then finally, we want to go to edit, refine, remove empty proteins. And at this point, if we had kept the reverse proteins, we'd see that they would have all gone away as well. None of those reverse proteins meet that cutoff. So that's how we build a document that has, I mean, we lost a bunch of proteins, right? And we lost a bunch of peptides. But a lot of them were things we couldn't measure. and then the rest were things we couldn't measure reliably. So, and then finally, so we could stop there. And in fact, I did stop there, but that we don't have to. You can look at some of these. So that's one. So I guess we're already down to a lot of our proteins having just a few peptides, but you know, maybe we don't even need quite, you know, this one, I don't know how many, this is about 15 different peptides. You know, maybe we would prefer to have some sort of, you know, maximum number of peptides that we're going to measure a protein by. And we could do that in Skyline by going to Edit, Refine, Advanced. And then going to Results and saying the maximum peptide peak rank is, say, 5. And actually, yeah, click OK. And unfortunately, got to fix this. That removed my IRT standards. So it gave me the 5 most intense IRT standards. I thought I had made it so that no refinements actually affected standards, but this one apparently did. So I got to fix that. But otherwise, I get down to, now I'm down to, I have 7,000 peptides to measure. And if I went with Edit, Refine, Advanced, I could also go to 3. And so this might be an interesting experiment to look at is, okay, so now I'm down to 5,000 peptides to measure. So I think it would be pretty interesting to know how do these compare, right? Do we really, even if we can measure things at 20% CV, do we really need that many peptides to measure a protein? Let's go back to the CV view. I guess it doesn't change things that much. Yeah, we're still doing median normalization, so some things are showing up, but we now have a median CV of 7.2. Anyway, so I didn't do that. If you did that, you can undo twice and get back to the document that actually contains all the IRTs and contains only 20% CVs. And then now you can, we can all do File, Save As. Actually, let's not do File, Save As quite yet. Go Edit, Manage Results, Remove All, OK. So now if we wanted to create a new template, that's it. We've got the new template. Oh, the last thing we need to do, We need to replace the decoys because these decoys probably were refined also. Yeah, so you can see there's not much left in the decoys. What? Because I'm trying to create a new template. So my goal is to have 2 document templates that I'm going to import the osmotic shock into. And I just told you that potentially we could have 4. We could have everything low CV with 5 peptides and low CV with 3 peptides. I'm kind of interested in that one now, but we're just going to do everything in low CV. And this is sort of what I started investigating with Mina, and Olga got pretty interested in as well, and so we decided, hey, let's base the capstone around this idea. Okay, so now we would do file save as. Oh, we didn't, sorry, we need to replace the decoys, edit, refine, add decoy peptides. It's going to tell us, hey, you've already got some decoy peptides, but yeah, we want to replace them. And just click OK. So now we have a new template that we can import data into and run a model and then export and run MS stats on. Right? But it's got 226,000 transitions, and it's only measuring, 27,000 peptides, or actually 13,000 true peptides, target peptides. So we'll save that as hands-on Selevsec low CV, and save. So just save it as hands-on Selevsec low CV. And then if you want, you can actually open the file that I created that should be a lot like it. And that would be Selevsec low CV in the same folder. And if you open that, it may not be exact because I didn't. But yeah, you can see it's very similar. We're measuring 27,000 total peptides, or about 13,000 peptides, target peptides, and these would all have low CVs. So now we have our original document, Selevsec and Selevsec low CV, and what we'd like to do is import the osmotic shock data into it. And I did that, so you don't have to. So let's now open the low CVI. So we have these 2 files, Selevsec all I and Selevsec low CVI, which are the 2 files with the osmotic shock data imported into them. But let's just do the low CV one because it's a little smaller. Actually, does everybody understand? So, like, the import that I'm skipping is pretty simple, right? You would just go File, Import Results, OK, single injection replicates, and then, well, we don't have it here. Oh yeah, I don't have the WIF files, unless I plug in my flash drive or my USB drive. So if I go here and then on E, and I get into this, then on E, I have WIF OS and WIF rep. And so I just showed you the one with the rep data imported. And if I go here are the osmotic shock data, 18 replicates. And so what I'm skipping for you is just select all these. Or in fact, I did them on my laptop with the script that I showed you. But that's how you can get data imported into Skyline. You've done that with other things. And so we're just going to go file, open, low CVI, and open it. Any questions so far? Are people basically following what we're doing? Anybody have any questions? No? Everybody good? Okay, so here once again the retention times look nice. The reproducibility of the peak areas of the IRTs are not so great. These are all spiked in. But so then the next thing we would do, so now you just imagine we waited for an import to finish. We just finished the import. And now we're going to go refine and reintegrate to do an M-profit model. So this should be getting pretty repetitive. Who actually needs more time to open the document? Okay, most people got it open. All right, cool. So we're gonna go. If you've done it, you can go ahead and refine, reintegrate, and then you can see that there's still a leftover peak scoring model in here, but we're gonna add a new one. All right. So who got to where they've got edit peak scoring model up? A few people. People need more. Who needs more time? There you go. Okay. This is a good data. You can go back to your boss and request a new laptop. So once you get here, again, we're just going to click train model, and it will take a few iterations to train the model. And what do we think of that model? Yeah, interestingly, intensity is still negative, but otherwise everything looks really quite good. Mass error looks nice, and all our library and shape score are the most powerful as usual. And we really only have one distribution. We have one target distribution, which is pretty well separated from the decoy distribution, and that's largely because we did that prior refinement. Right, so we've already removed all the things that couldn't be measured in the replicates, and even ones that couldn't be measured at least 4 times, and so we're really expecting to be able to measure these things pretty well. So we can name this model low CV and OK. And then OK again to apply it to this document. And then once it's applied, so we can just leave it alone while it's applying, we need to get annotations in again, right? We've imported replicates, we want to annotate them so that we can export a report and do our MS stats analysis, right? So if we go back to our USB folder, in SelevSec, there's also a files.csv, right? So we had a files.csv in the Bruder folder that we opened up, and here's the one for the SelevSec, and this is the way Mina told me she would like them to be annotated. So let's go ahead and select the bioreplicate and condition and copy it. So these are the files, the 18 files here, 1 through 18 that we just imported. And those are the annotations that Mina wants on them. It's right in that SelevSec folder, and it's called files.csv. So If you get to CelebSec 2015, there should be a file CSV. And then now we can go to what do we do to how do we get those annotations on? Who can tell me? Done this what? Document grid. Okay, we can go to the document grid. And where do we need to go next? View replicates. And what do we need to do next? No, we don't customize. We need to go to settings. Yeah, somebody got it. Document settings. And we need to check these two things to get them into our document. And we could, again, go to reports and check MS Stats Input Plus and click OK. And now we've got those. And we select the top one and paste. And now everything is annotated. Right? And we want to double click that. We want to double check that everything's in the right order. So if yours doesn't go from 1 to 18 in sequence, then probably you want to sort by replicate name, because we're kind of depending. You can see document settings, document settings. And then you check those two, and you can check your report. What? Yeah, it's a spreadsheet. You want to delete everything out, go like that. Just select it all and press delete. Yeah. Oh, delete. Yeah. Backspace. Yeah, is like a text editing command. So do people have that? All right. We can close the document grid. And then we can save this. Yeah, just save this file. Working with very big files on a laptop. And then once it's saved, are people saved? No, I'm not saved yet. Well, for those of you who were here this morning, it seems that the building the Bruder library finally completed, and there's quite a lot of these are ambiguously assigned spectra, but we can just OK past that. Now we have a library from Bruder data, and it's adding IRTs to the library, and it looks like it was really happy with our IRTs, an R of 0.998, and this is the regression we can look at. So I now have a great Bruder library. Do I want to recalibrate the IRTs? I'm going to say no, because this is data coming from Biognosis. And then, do I want to go ahead and add a retention time predictor to my document? Okay. All right, and then what I really want to do is have a look at this spectral library from this morning. And I'm gonna OK that. So yeah, so this is the MaxQuant spectral library built for the Bruder data. So if I wanted to, now the way we did Bruder, right, is we imported the assay library, which includes the choices that Bruder and colleagues made about the transitions. But now I have my own library with 28,000 of these, and you can see that these are full spectra. although they don't contain a lot of noise, they are actually pretty nice spectra. But these are from MaxQuant, directly from MaxQuant, with lots more ions than I had in my assay library. So while we're waiting, all right, so mine's saved, yours is all, it must be all saved by now. And what we would do is we'd go File, Export Report, and we would choose this MS Stats input and invariant and choose Export. MS Stats input or input plus, either one. And maybe, actually, let's just go by that. So let's skip that step because I have all the reports exported. So you're going to be able to get those reports to work with Mina. So, and we can maybe leave one report exporting when we go to lunch, and then people can see that it will complete. But it takes a little bit of time with these big documents. So the last thing we'll do is now open up. So we just processed this low CV document, which has considerably fewer transitions than our full document. So let's open up the full document. File, open, Celebsec all I. So this is a full document, and it's going to take a little bit longer to open. This is without any refinement, just using the spectral library results. And the original Celebsec paper included semi-triptych peptides too, which I would feel more comfortable with if I were doing low CVs, because if there's a semi-triptych peptide that can produce a pretty low CV, then I trust it more. And it might be useful. I still might not include it over a normally tryptic peptide if I had one that was of decent intensity. But it might give us more points to measure per protein. Anybody remember how many transitions the big one has? I think it's over 600,000. So, you know, maybe as much as 3 times as many as the low CV one. So who thinks that they would prefer to measure 3 times as much stuff because they might actually find something that they won't find if they do that refinement step? Ben, come on, man. Ben would prefer. Sometimes, yeah. There you go. Okay. We're definitely heading toward you shouldn't, but that at the McCoss lab, and it sounded. Whoa, what is going on?
What are the set of things you call the significance in terms of between group comparison in one case or the other, and do they overlap? Do you find new things because of the lower multiple testing correction bias in your refined data and that kind of stuff? And that would be interesting to know.
Yes, I think it's hard to say, but I believe yes that like so yeah, it's my belief that you can sort of do the hypothetical experiment in your head, and you will find things that you like. You're adding noise to your measurements. If you can have low noise measurements of the same proteins, it is not helpful to increase the noise. Yeah, right. If you have a large enough, so you're yeah, and I mean it's definitely larger sample sets. You know, if you're standard if you compensate for noisy data by having really large cohorts, then that will improve your ability to tell a mean difference among the cohorts. But what I've been seeing is that proteomics people use fairly small group sizes, and in fact yeah so but if you're going to use small sets, then you're way more likely to get false discoveries because now you just have more noise, more outliers, and you're likely to get false discoveries, and we have to make the transition from false discoveries from what can I detect to false discoveries in what is changing, which is
on the unrefined data, do the statistics on refined data, and make some Venn diagrams of what you call statistically significant in one case or another. Right? It seems like there would be two circles that would be somewhat overlapping, but there would be things called significance in the refined data because of the reduced multiple testing issues, and there might be things called significance in the unrefined data because that wouldn't be there in the refined data because you pick them up, right? So I'd like to see those.
So yeah, I think we need Olga's group and Ting. That's it, right up the alley of what Ting did that Rudy was talking about. I think it's unlikely. These are actually all controlled mixture experiments, so we know what's changing and we know how much we've changed it. And you know, there's really not an easy way to say, oh, I kicked out something that I'm interested in. We know that we didn't kick out anything that we're interested in because we know we. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that on average you're gonna do yourself more harm by having a lot of noise than by having fewer things. But that's my bias. Okay, so there's the all. You can see that there are 600,000 transitions, and we would like to go now edit, refine, reintegrate. Right. So this is again. This is the same thing that we did the replicate measurements on and removed everything with high CVs. Now we're just going to say, oh, we're not doing that refinement step. We want to know what the data looks like if we just did everything the way some people would have us do. So now we're going to add a new training model for this thing. Although I seem to be having some problems with memory, so I might have to. This step is also fairly memory intensive. And don't worry if everybody's been through this enough times. You kind of get the series of steps that we're doing. And we're trying to create the reports that we're eventually going to analyze with Mina. While this is calculating, I will show you those reports. Because I was so short on disk space, they're in zip files here. So if you go to your Explorer and look at CelebSec 2015, you can see two reports. One is all and one is low CV. And you can just use your favorite zip tool to just extract here, or whatever, however you unzip files. You're going to want to eventually have that report to work with Mina. and then the same 7-zip extract here. I'm using 7-zip, but you can use whatever you want. And so now I have 2 CSV files, and those are MS Stats reports. And then last, you can go up to DIAPub and Bruderer, and there's one more CSV. There's one more zip file here, which is also says MS Stats input assay library, and this 7-zip extract here. So now I have 3 CSV files, 2 for SlevSec, 1 for Bruderer, and I'm completely prepared for Mina's what Mina's going to show us next. I've gotten to where I've got the edit peak scoring model up, and I can click train model. And this usually goes reasonably quickly because most of the scores have already been loaded into memory at this point. And we can get through maybe 5 to 6 iterations, although this. So actually, if you look at the number of peaks below a 2% FDR, it's not that much higher than with the low CV case. But it's taken quite a few iterations to work out this model, and then once you look at, oh, now it's got to calculate the scoring contributions. We should show the graph before we show the scoring contribution. So there's the unprofit model, and if we compare it to the low CV, I mean, the model is not that different, right? Retention time's a little bit stronger predictor, and then the coefficients and what is important is not that different from the low CV model, but the big difference is we have this whole other distribution that is essentially equivalent to decoys. So we still can't measure a lot of things. But the people who would have us do this, I think would contest that, okay, so this is, these Q values are going to screen out all the things that you couldn't measure, and so you don't need to do the CV. Like, the statistics that we apply on this data, this full data set, will be sufficient to screen out peptides that would be problematic, and therefore we can just take whatever is detectable now and put it into the statistics. And so we'll call this SlevSec all. Click OK, and then OK again to actually apply the peak picks. And so then the only thing left to do would be to actually export that MS Stats input report, and you would be ready to go do statistics with Mina. So we have a little bit more time. Do people have questions? Is everybody following how we got these 3 things and what we potentially are going to test quantitatively? Right? We would actually have to, we would have to apply the osmotic shock replicate annotations, the bioreplicate and condition to this document as well, but we're pretty close to done with this document. And really to do the statistical analysis, you just need these CSV files that we just unzipped. Okay, so we have 8 replicates, and the CV histogram just shows us for the replicates that we can detect this thing in, what is the CV? You're familiar with the concept of a CV, right? It's the standard deviation over the mean, and it gives you some some measure of how reproducibly you can measure something, and we're expecting that in our replicate measurements, we expect, we'd love to see a CV of 0, or like yeah, meaning we measured exactly the same thing in all 8 replicates. But so what we're doing is we're saying that above, at some point, we're just not going to include peptides in our measurements, our quantitative measurements, if we can't prove that we can measure them reproducibly. And so that's what that step is. It's like, okay, we're gonna do replicate measurements, and then we're gonna see what we can measure reproducibly. And we did replicate measurements over a day, so 24 hours. So we're assuming that probably the person who did them wasn't pulling new sample out of the freezer for every measurement, which means that there's some time where the peptides could be degrading. If methionine oxidation was a problem, then it might show up. So that gets us a bunch of potential issues out of the data before we do the statistics on it, the quantitative statistics on it. And if I'm trying to produce a clinical assay, if I'm trying to get a really reproducible, like Andy Hufnagel, I know you were here in the first thing, but how many people actually attended the first session, the first Skyline session? Oh wow, a lot of you. So yeah, Andy Hufnagel is talking about doing a 5x5 assay where you measure your assay 5 times in a day over 5 days, and then proving your CVs of that assay. So when you're doing something that's going to become an actual clinical assay, or even just something that you might measure thousands of times, this reproducibility of measurement is extremely important, and the people who are leading that direction of investigation are pushing for more and more stringency in the things that get measured. Andy Hufnagel is the first person that I believe to have created a clinical mass spec assay, which is measured. I think there are more since then, but he created a thyroglobulin assay for measuring thyroid cancer remission, and it measures one transition and one peptide to measure one protein. But it's really it's a very tuned assay. And why didn't they just measure 5? Well, because 5 wasn't as good as 1, right? So here we're just kind of throwing a lot at saying, oh, we're going to measure 6, and we'll measure every peptide we could possibly. I mean, they actually got down to, I'm sure they would have loved to have measured multiple peptides for that protein, but they found that it made their measurements less reproducible. So yes, I believe we need discovery proteomics in order to discover things. So we can't always target, but I also think that there may be ways that we can improve the reproducibility that will allow us to discover to have more sensitive quantitative measurements, and that we don't always just have to go like, okay, well, everything that we saw we're going to include in our quantitative analysis. Any other? So did that answer your question? No. Oh, the Q value. Okay. What's the Q value? So because yeah, we were saying. So what the cutoff that I actually applied was things that were detected in my 8 replicates at a Q value of 0.01. So anything that has a Q value of greater than 0.01 isn't included. And so I had to have peptides that were found that way at least 4 times out of 8. That was the cutoff I set. So when I was increasing the number of replicates from 2 to, I could go all the way up to 8. If I went all the way up to 8, that was saying I only want to include things that were detected in every sample, which is a perfectly valid choice. I chose to say I want at least 4 samples because I know that if I go with just at least 1 sample, that's a much more likely, I'm choosing something very low abundance or that's just a false discovery rate. So I want some reproducibility of detection, and then I included a reproducibility of quantitatively reproducible by using a CV filter. So it's a 2-point filter, below 20% CV with 4 detections. So that was the filter we applied, and we lose peptides. Turns out we lose all of our reversed peptides if we do that. So by that reversed metric, we have essentially a false discovery rate of 0, and then we take that into our next round of measurement. So yeah, people producing actual clinical assays or assays that are going to get used a lot over thousands and thousands of runs definitely believe in this that you're going to get better results if you can lower your noise and create more precise measurements. And so the question is, do we need to do discovery proteomics on everything in order to have the best chance of discovering things? Or, what we're beginning to contest is that it's possible that you're actually adding false discoveries and reducing your sensitivity, which will actually even cause you to have more false negatives. So it's kind of counterintuitive, like, oh, if I add more things, then I'll be able to detect everything that is happening. But it's actually possible that you miss more things by adding more things, right? That's the truth of statistics, is that if you add more multiple tests, and it's absolutely true if you add multiple tests that aren't true. So the more your prior probability of finding something that is interesting goes down, like the more you throw in stuff that's not true, the more difficult it is for you to find the things that are true. So you think of it as the needle in the haystack. The bigger you make that haystack, the harder it's going to be to find that needle. And so you will actually get, despite the fact that you feel like, oh, I put a million things in there, I've got to discover something. Well, it might cause you to miss the one thing that you're interested in. All right, but yes, we need statisticians to help us more with this. And after lunch, Mina's going to give us some new insights, I hope. Okay. Any other questions? Then I think we can break a little early for lunch and come back at 1:30, and we'll start with MS stats. All right. Cool. Everybody knows how to process data. I don't know how. I think I'm expecting it's not as memory intensive as this. No, because we've reduced it to these fairly small. I mean, let's look at the size of the reports. I mean, they're right. The reports themselves are they're hundreds of megabytes, but we've been dealing with like gigabyte sized things, right? So I think now we're safe. We're going into R, and we're just going to do quantitative analysis. Yeah, so let's go ahead and let's switch back to our smaller document. So if you go to SelevSec low CSV, and I got to save. But if you go back to SelevSec low CSVI, before you go to lunch, you can just go ahead and export the MS Stats input report, and I promise you by the time you come back from lunch, it'll be done. If you had more memory, it would be quite a bit faster. But yeah, I'm running into my memory limit with it. It really shouldn't take more than 5 minutes, I don't think. It's meant to run on a laptop, but not with proteome-sized data. Like, I mean, you think about this. I can't even give you the raw data files, right? And I've got a 500 gigabyte flat SSD here, which is jam packed with everything that I would want you to have, and I can't give you all a 500 gigabyte SSD. I couldn't even give you all a 64 gigabyte flash drive because that was too expensive. So, so this kind of processing, DIA processing, I mean, yeah, all the files, yeah, we can look at the file sizes. If you want to, if you were here for session 1, when we're dealing with SRM or even PRM data would be fine. The file sizes are way smaller, and everything processes much more quickly. So, and in fact, when we teach, I mean, this is the first time we've tried to teach this scale of data on laptops. I said the only other place that we do it is in Zurich, and there we have virtualization. ETH sets up virtualization. Everybody is working on a VM, and we still do small data. We still limit everybody. How big are the hard drives? 64 gigabyte, or okay. Well, anyway, even the virtualized hard drives, we can't give everybody 500 gigabytes of hard drive space. So it's like real life, this data, you don't want to be doing it on your laptop. Real life, you should get a desktop computer. I would recommend getting one with 64 gigabytes of RAM. Those, as I said, for $2,000, you can get a hex core with 64 gigabytes of RAM now, and I would do that. Like that. You're gonna be way happier processing data like this under those circumstances. So yeah, here's the Bruder data is here, and yeah, we've been running Skyline on AWS. We're actually using Windows clusters to run Skyline and Encyclopedia and do a bunch of processing. But yeah, you can see the Bruder data is like 2.8 gigabytes per file, and then the CelebSec data. These osmotic shock things are all like 5 gigabytes per file, right? So yeah, it's 100-fold more intense than the. So okay, so then file export, and I have a 16 and a 32 gigabyte desktop, and most of the processing goes quite quickly on it. So just having a desktop with faster stuff. So then we can export a report, MStats input plus, invariant, and now it asks us where we want to put this, and I'm going to put it in the CelebSec, and I will call this hands-on MStats input plus, and I'll start that exporting during lunch.